I'm Digital Native, and this is a track walkthrough of my track Soon I Promise, taken from the Goldfat Full Fat '01 compilation, which is currently available now. If you've not checked that out, go and take a listen, but let's get into it. Okay, so you get the idea. So what we'll have a look at first is the drums. So I've just opened those out. So these are all the drum parts. There's a fair few layers going on, but you know, each is just adding their own little bit to it. There's a few bits that are just filling out the main parts of the drums, and then there's just lots of little shakers and different bits like that. So just have a check out of some of the main bits and have a look at some of the main sort of techniques and stuff that I use. So first off, we've got so the first thing I added in was this cajon, I think, in terms of the drums anyway, and that starts from the intro. So just have a listen to that. Not a lot going on in terms of any EQ or anything. A little boost up the tops, hot roll off on the bottom and the tops. I use these channel pre-filters, so it sort of filters the low and the high end. So if I want to get rid of any of that, I'll do that before it goes into any of the inserts. There's a bit of transient shaping, just rolling off the front, because this carries on throughout the rest of the drums, so I didn't want it sort of peeking around too much. It was mainly the ring off it, and it was quite sort of, there's quite a big transient on it, so I just wanted to smooth that off a little bit. That is coming off this cajon plugin, which is really cool. Quite a few VSTs in this, or contact instruments I've used from the piano book libraries in this. I think I found that site around about this time, so there's quite a few bits in there in this track from that site. It's a really good site, that's well worth checking out. You can basically choose your balance between where the sound is coming from on the actual cajon itself, choose sort of how much bass, mid, how much of the tap is coming through, and like just really change the sort of tone of the hits and stuff. So that's a really cool little thing. That's free as well. They're all free on the piano books. And then in terms of the rest of the break, the main sort of, I suppose, character of the drums is coming from this break. Which in this particular track I chopped up, it's all chopped up in audio. See, I faded some of the ends out and just sort of got all the hits lined up how I need them. In terms of processing, I've listened to that without anything. Tightened it up quite a bit, One of the things I use on my drums quite a lot is multi-band transient shaper. I do use like single band ones, like Transient Master mostly, or I'll sometimes use the one that's built into Cubase channel strip. But I do use multi-band envelope shapers quite a lot because you can hone in exactly on the areas that you want, and just sort of set the levels, really pull in and tighten up, particularly old breaks. Just jump back. So you can really sort of dial in and really sort of clean up areas in old breaks. So I use that quite a lot. Next, a bit of EQ, which is just pulling out some nasties. Because it's a live break, there was a few sort of resonant frequencies in there, so just cleaning those up. And then rolling off some low end. And then, because I tightened it up quite a lot, I wanted to kind of bring some of that back, so I used this max volume because it was a little bit pokey at that point, but it was nice and sort of clean, and that just thickens it up again. And I've got a compressor on the end of there, which doesn't seem to be doing anything. I think maybe that was doing something, but it's not, because it's not being fed by anything. So I think that I must have switched that to somewhere else. So that's the main character break within the drums, and then everything else is sort of built around that. So the rest of the stuff is kind of like shakers and just all the toppy elements. So I'll come to those in a minute. Have a look at the kick and the snare first. So there's a couple of layers in the kick. Just that one. So a sort of more thuddy layer, and then a sort of more live top layer. You can see I've rolled off some of the bottom on there. I'll get away if I can with using the channel strip EQs if I can, just because they're quick and it just sort of saves a bit of time, and they're just simple to use. So those go together to make the main kick. You can see in Cubase you can switch on and off sort of the output chain, so you can see all the steps in where it's going. So that kick is then going into a kick group. Let's have a quick look at that. Got a bit of saturation going on. I use this a lot, pretty much I'd say every track that I make has probably got this saturation knob on it somewhere. And then going into the effects rack from Sound Toys, a bit of Decapitator, a bit of the Devil Lock, just giving a bit of like crunch. And then I was trying to sort of force a little bit of low end in, so I've got this filter freak on it, which kind of boosting the lows whilst pulling down the tops a little bit, which I guess is a little bit like a sort of you could set up a multi-band compressor to do the same sort of thing. That's also going into the drums, like submix channels, and that's feeding into the bass, which we'll come to in a bit, so feeding the side chain on the bass. After that we've got the snare, a couple of snare layers. So that's one. That is like a resampled snare from when I first started sort of making this track. I'd built up these 3 snare layers. I think it's 4 in there actually, a couple of snares, a click and a clap, and then I resampled those afterwards. So they're coming from which makes up that. So then I just resampled that, put those to one side, and added one that it got a little bit more brightness to it. In terms of processing, roll off a little bit at the bottom, pulling up a bit of the tops on those, nothing special. Again, rolling off a bit of bottom and tops on those, pulling out a couple of frequencies that are obviously poking out, and they're feeding sort of various side chains, maybe in the other musical elements or other shakers and things like that, just to sort of stop any sort of transients poking through where you get a bit of a build up. Again, if you look there, that's feeding into a snare group and then going into the drum groups. In terms of the snare group, just a clipper on there, solo that. That's really just shaving off the tops just a little tiny bit. This is a free plugin, this is decent. I use this a fair bit. I tend to reach for clippers these days over maybe a limiter, just because I find you can get away with a lot more without really hearing any sort of impact much on the sound. That is also, that's been sent to the drum verb, so I've got like a drum verb channel, so it's getting a bit of reverb on it. After that, we've got all like the top layers and stuff. So in terms of those, it's probably a good time to have a look at the drum bus channels. Where are we? So we go to the groups. So we've had a look at this kick and the snare group, and then I'll feed all the rest of it into the tops. I think what I did on this one is like the main character break is going into the drum full channel, so that you're not you're getting as much as sort of the weight of that as possible, and then any other tops and stuff are going into the drum tops, and then I've just got a kick and snare group, and so all those three will be feeding into the full drum channel. And on this particular one, normally I'd probably just go into a drum channel, and then if I've got any like parallel channels, like for instance, I've got the drum parallel processing and drum verb, I'd normally just leave it at that. This one, I decided for whatever reason, I sent everything that was to do with the drums into a final mix, which is where most of the bus processing went in the end anyway. I wouldn't always do that, but I did on this track for whatever reason. So if I listen to the tops, just scroll back up. That's all these layers, and they're basically just lots of different shakers really, and different little percussive elements. If I look at just on solo that, got a little snappy break, again using the multiband envelope shaper, just reining that in. Mainly in the low mids, tends to be where you get like a lot of the sort of room noise and stuff. Bit of clipping. That was quite transient heavy, and it didn't need to be, so I just pulled just like locked a load of that off the top. Compressor, which I'd obviously put on for some side chaining from somewhere else, but then I probably just ended up putting all that onto the tops channel. And then finally a bit of EQ at the end, just pulling out a couple of resonant frequencies, and a little bit of build up in the top, and then just a bit of low and top sort of roll offs. Similar thing there, rolling off the bottom, bringing out a bit in the tops and a bit in the mids. This one I wanted a little bit wider, give it a bit of width, because I think, I'm not sure, in mono? No, it's in stereo, but it's not a very wide break, so I just wanted to add a bit of width to it. Not very much on that. And then this MSED from Voxengo, just pulling out the sides a bit. Quite subtle, but just a little bit. And again, tiny little bit of clipping on there, just taking off. Most of them not even getting touched. It's just the really sort of high transient peaks just getting chopped off. Another one that's just giving it a bit more groove. It's got a bit more mid-range going on here. Again, obviously a resonant peak in there, a little bit bringing out some of the tops, a bit of widener just again to give it a bit of width. And again, I've got another shaker, yeah, so all the compressors on here looks like what I've probably done is, yeah, fed it all to the tops, and then I've just processes, done any sidechain compression on there. So if I'm like sending the kick to it or the snare or whatever, it's all just happening on the main channel. A higher, just right up in the tops shaker. All the bottom rolled off on that because it was only really just to add that little sort of sheen at the top. And another one just giving a slightly different rhythm. So they're all just building together. No processing on that at all by the look of it. That's probably a bit of EQ. Yeah, just massive roll off on that using the channel pre-EQ. No compression, no nothing, no other processing. This little one, that's just like a little end turnaround. I used that again in the breakdown actually, where I used the full break. And I've just chopped that up in audio. But that's coming off the sampler track. You can see again I've added the multi-band envelope shaper there. So this time I've just pulled down, because you can change the levels once you've got the bands, a bit like a multi-band compressor. Well, in the multi-band in Cubase anyway, you set it up like this and then you just pull the level down like that. So I just took out all the bottoms, rolled off a bit of the transient in that low bit, because obviously it was just, there was too much there with all the other breaks that were going on, and then just pulled all the release down on that, just to really tighten it up. And that's making quite a big difference. But yeah, that's coming off the sampler track, Cubase sampler track. So we used this loads. I actually made this in an older version of Cubase, but this has been updated since. So you've got an extra few things, so you can add slice on it, and I use that a lot now. Loads of other sort of little features, and it's got some cool little additions to it. But this was just triggering it straight off the main sample, which was just triggering a few hits just to start it from the beginning. So nothing crazy going on there. And then the rest of the drums, got some rides. A little shuffle. And those three there, I've not really got any processing on at all. Probably low and high cut stuff, just to prevent any like build up of anything. But other than that, that's nothing going on there. And then sort of reverse crashes and things like that, just to into the builds and into the drops and stuff. And like I say, all that is going into this tops group. So if I look on there, that's all the tops together. So very subtle, nothing's doing anything massive, it's just adding a bit to it. So again, saturation knob, just giving it a bit of, just sort of helping to sort of thicken it up a little bit. I use this Pultec emulation from Waves, really like this. Just a little bit of a boost up around about 8K. Not a lot of else going on, but I find I always use this on drums. I just find it adds a really subtle bit of width and just a little bit of just a little bit of character to them. So I like that quite a lot. Got this drama, which is like a sort of it's just like a multi sort of processor thing. It's adding a bit, you can add a bit of compression, and it's got some EQ going on in it and things, but it's got this little air button. Just adds a little bit in the tops. Again, a clipper, just shaving off the real high peaks. Most of it's not even getting touched. And then this is where the sidechain will be coming from. So just got a sidechain coming from the snare. Just I'll find that. Where's it gone? Yeah, just basic sidechain really. And again, those are going to the drum reverb, which I'll come to in a sec. all of those are going into the full drums bus, and that's not really got a lot going on, but that's where I'll be sending that to the parallel channel for any parallel processing. That's just bringing in just a tiny little bit of on a transient shaper, just to tighten it up just a touch, and then I've got that being sent off into drum parallel channel. So I normally have a parallel channel with pretty heavy compression on it, and then a drum reverb channel. So the drum parallel channel is doing this. It's just pretty slammed really. This is another one I use quite a lot, the API 2500, about 12 dB of gain reduction. I'd left a little bit of the attack in there. Ratio 10:1, really short release. Sometimes I take all the attack off, it just depends. I mean, it's just do it to taste really. I'd send that into a saturator. I don't really know why. I wouldn't always do that, I sometimes do. Don't use this particular plugin too much though. So obviously just thickening it up a little bit. And then that was going into this maximizer, but that isn't actually doing anything other than just checking the level. Just bringing the level down a little bit. It's not actually doing any, just zero. That it's not, well, maybe just a little bit, just tiny little bits, but I think it was mainly just a bit of a level adjustment. So we'll listen to that without. Just thickening them up. So that's something I'll do on every track, is put a parallel drum channel on there and just squash it a bit and then bring that level back up. You can see that's probably quite a lot lower than the rest of the drums. Again, that's just something that's whatever that suits the track really. And then there's a reverb channel. So I use this reverb quite a lot, which is a soft tube one. If you've got like a Focusrite, or I think there's some others that do it as well, you get these some free soft tube plugins with it, and this is one of them. I just really like this one. So I use this a fair amount, really short reverb time, tiny little bit of pre-delay on it, just to move it out of the way of the transients. Full wet, obviously. And then I roll off at about 600, and that's just bringing out a bit of a peak. So I do that as well. So if there's a build up in any certain area in the drums when you're sending it to a reverb, it can just cause these like resonant peaks. So it's normally round about where the main sort of frequency content is in your drums, to be fair. So I'll pull some of that out. Sometimes I'll do some more, you know. In that one it was just that particular area, but that's something that's worth doing, is EQing your send effects, so that you've got the reverb sort of, or the delay or whatever it is, just sitting around your drums, rather than you've got these sort of build-ups and resonances, and it just kind of just makes it a bit messy. It's just a lot cleaner if you can use a bit of EQ on it. And all those go into the drum submix. So this is basically everything to do with drums is going in here. Again, looks like there's loads going on, but it's not, each one thing is not doing anything massive. Got a bit of compression, using, again, I think this was around about the time I got these plugins. I don't really use these, well, I don't use them at all really, to be fair. I'd normally go to other ones, but I was trying them out, so there's a few bits in this that I probably don't really use now. That's just giving a little bit of compression, fast release, fairly low ratio, slow attack, so it's not killing any transients. Bit of EQ, just bringing out just somewhere up in the tops, and a bit of the low mids, I think. The Drama S73 again, just a little bit of sheen on the top with that air, maybe a tiny little bit of compression, but it's only being mixed in just a tiny little bit, so it's not really doing an awful lot. Again, going into this pull tech, this time boosting some of the low end. And a little bit of the tops, around about 12. Like I say, I think it adds that just tiny little bit of width. It might just be in my mind, I don't know, maybe I'm just imagining it, but yeah, that's then going into the decapitator, which is just giving a little bit of subtle drive. Just a bit of crunch, not too much. And then finally into a clipper. Which is not doing an awful lot at all. I've turned the softness up a little bit, so it's just kind of rounding off the ends of some of the, probably just smoothing off the tops mostly, just a little bit. And that's the drums, pretty much, I think. What we'll have a look at next is the musical elements, I think. So, in terms of this track overall, what I was trying to do was get a fairly... I wanted the sort of mix down to be quite fluid, so things sort of blending in, tech in focus in the track, fair bit of automation, so things evolving a little bit and just coming in and out of view. So there's a fair few musical little parts in it, but nothing's... they just sort of all complement each other. There's quite a lot of call and answer stuff going on, and that gets mimicked in the bass and the effects as well. So everything kind of just plays off each other a little bit. So the main musical element is obviously the piano in this, which would have been the first bit that I did. Which is this. That's coming off the Quiet Piano, which is from another one from the piano book libraries. In terms of processing, bit of compression, bit of isotope vinyl, bit of EQ, so rolling off the tops and the bottoms, and then those are automated throughout, just to sort of let it sort of come in and out of view a little bit and just open it up in places, just to stop it being just getting too loopy or static. And then that's I think these delays here were originally on the track, but then I moved them into sends just so I got a bit more control over them. And then it's going into this tape emulation. I don't really use this one. I use it on this track, but I'd normally go for like the Waves Kramer tape. But yeah, nothing crazy going on in there. Just open up the channel. Again, I've used those pre-filters, and then you can see the sends here to a couple of different... I've got a piano verb and a couple of different delays that are just automating on and off. And that one that is automating up and down there, just bring up the automation. It's just sort of bringing up towards the end of phrases. So it just rings off. And then a slightly different one on the next one. In fact, that is... Oh no, actually that's the frequency on the EQ. It's that one down the bottom, I think. Yeah, piano delay level. So just bringing it up and down, just so it's just ringing out. And then when it comes to the main drop, I wanted it to ring out, so I didn't want the piano going throughout because I thought it was just going to get too loopy, so I just started using it a bit more sparingly. But I wanted it still to be there, so I sort of filled it out with a delay, so I got it to ring off so it kind of joins the gaps between. So if I listen to that, so it just fills in that little gap between, so it's not front and center, but it's just still kind of ringing on. And that piano goes sort of throughout in places. but it's mainly in the intro, mostly a little section there, and then towards the end, just to stop it getting, like I say, too loopy. And then in and around that are all the other sort of little elements. So just close that up. I wanted to keep using it, but I wanted it to be a little bit different. So in a sort of later section, as it moves through, and I think this is just sort of leading into where the vocal comes in, I chopped it up, I reversed it, and I use those as little sort of motif bits as well. So I'm kind of just teasing it in there, and then that turns into its own little section. So I basically reversed the piano and then chopped it up, because obviously it was in reverse, it was all out of order. So I chopped it up and then put it back into the order it should be, so that it still fit with the sort of the melody and the bass line and everything. And then in terms of processing on it, fairly heavy high and low cuts, which is basically just creating a bandpass filter, and then I've got that sort of sweeping about just to add a bit of interest. If I get the automation up, you'll see that. So yeah, a few bits in there. What else we got? So yeah, just gently moving around on the EQ, not a lot, just giving it a gentle bit of movement, and then a bit of tremolo, which I think there's a couple of tremolos on there, I don't know why, but this is the stock one, and then the tremolator. Just helps to give it a bit of interest and make it just a bit more different again. Obviously it's reversed, but just make it a bit more different from the piano again, but you're just keeping that same kind of tone. And then the rest of like the sort of piano bits, just to reinforce things that are going on, and just a bit of call and answer coming from some like one shots and stuff. So they're kind of reinforcing different parts within the piano melody. Nothing will be crazy going on those, probably just a bit of EQ. Yeah, just pulling out a couple of frequencies. Yeah, pianos normally tend to have a lot of resonant frequencies. And you know, there's no one size fits all. It depends how it's been recorded and what reverb it's got on it and different things like that. And if you've got a few of them together stacking up, then you know you can find that you've got a bit of a problem. So I find generally on a piano you need to be cutting out some frequencies. Again, more on there. That particular one shot there, one of them. Let's have a listen. Which is the sort of main downbeat. That's just got a bit of delay on it, a bit of reverb, and again just a bit of EQ. So they all just sort of build together to reinforce what's going on in the piano and just add a bit of like interest to what's going on, and just help to fill out the main sort of melodic element in the track really. And stop it just becoming just about that piano loop. So that's the pianos. I don't think they're being bussed. Yeah, they're just being bussed to the main music group. So everything musical will go to one group. And you can see I've got a piano reverb on there on Ascend, and the delays and stuff on that one. Those ones are also going to reverb and one of the delays, just to keep a bit of continuity in it. So I wouldn't just put different reverbs and delays on everything, because then you just get lots of stuff fighting with each other. So it helps if you've got sends where everything's going to, well, not everything, but some of the things are going to the same place. So in terms of like sections, and if I just sort of zoom out, you can see where the main clear sections are. So I've kind of got the main drop, this section here, which is where things kind of pull away. The main piano comes out, and then you get the reverse piano coming in. And it starts to build, and you can hear the bass coming down there, and we'll get to that in a minute. And as we progress along, it's sort of passing between different musical elements. Got a pad that comes in around there, along with the piano. All sort of like building back from the sort of release of the drop, where the piano comes out, all sort of building towards the vocal coming in the next section. That pad there, it's basically just drowned. It's a sample that I just drowned in lots of reverb, but it's actually not a pad. So that is from, if I turn all that off, and this is how you make a pad out of something that's not a pad. That's just being triggered off the sample track. It's just like a melodic pluck. That's actually from, shout out to Charlie Perspective, that's from his sample pack, or one of the sample packs up on his Patreon. I was digging through that, found that I didn't want a pluck. I wanted a pad, so I just sort of, yeah, drowned it in reverb and a couple of notes. It just makes a nice little pad. As we build through that section, there's a couple of other little bits coming in as well. So there's a little harp, which is just a little harp run that I wrote. I mean, all these kind of things, you can find these one-shot type things on sort of sample websites and stuff, but sometimes you need it exactly in key or exactly how you want it. It's just as easy if you've got something to write it yourself. There's a little raindrop guitar that starts to come in, so you just start to get these little bits like dropping in and out. Which I think was recorded from drops of water dropping on guitar strings, I think. That's from the piano books as well. It's just like a contact instrument. No processing other than a bit of low and high cut in there. What else is going on in that section? We've got this little soul reverse thing, which is something that happens throughout the track. So there's a lot of things that come and go, some things that only happen maybe once or not a lot within the track, but this is something that happens consistently on the little turnarounds. No crazy processing going on there, but reverb, but there's a massive dip out at the bottom that obviously got a resonance in there. Probably around about the kick or the bottom end of the piano type area, so just pulling that out. And that's pretty much it for that section, and then we lead into here, and then it picks up on another couple of elements. So the vocal comes in as well, which we'll have a look at in a minute, but then it sort of passes over to this other piano. Which is coming off this tape delay instrument. So it's kind of rise and fall. So when it drops, it kind of, there's a bit of a release. The piano comes out, it builds back up again. You then get the vocal and this other piano come in, and then there's another release towards the sort of breakdown in the middle. And I think that's most of the musical elements. I don't think there's anything else in there, just sort of little bits that pop in. We've got this couple more in the middle that I've missed there. So there's a muted piano, Not really doing a lot, just adding an extra. And that, again, plays off with these other bits here. So you've got a little call and answer. And just lots of passing between the instruments that are playing. And then what's that? This wibbly runner, which is just, I think I called it that just because it was a bit weird. That's just like a resampled one of the piano hits, I think. And then I think I reversed it and then just whacked just loads of effects on it just to make it sound completely different. So that's what it sounds like without, and I think if I just go to reverse that back to what it was, it's just a little, some part of one of the piano hits, and then I've just drowned it in various things. I won't go through all of those, but the main things that are doing the job are basically some reverb and delays and things like that. Just makes it just sound just a weird sort of bed layer, really, I suppose. One of the cool plugins that's on it is this. This was free. I don't know if it is free or if it was just on offer. It was free. Just like a flanger type plugin. Just gives you loads of weird little artifacts, and it can be really cool for when you're resampling stuff. So I use this a fair bit when I'm making, like, if I need to find other little effects elements or just little bits that I want to create within the track. I will use something like this because you can just get some really random sounds and then resample and stretch stuff, and there's some of that going on in the track actually, which we'll have a look at in a minute. But that's essentially, I think, all of the melodic elements. I'm just gonna zoom out. Yeah. And then in the second, as the break is there, so in the second half, you can see I've changed the arrangement a little bit, and yeah, similar reuse to some of the parts that are in there. The main change in the second half is that I've made some changes up in the bass, and just a slightly different arrangement. One thing I did create was this dreamy reverse keys. Just needed something a little extra for the second half, and that is something that I resampled from, I think it's from the Raindrop guitar. I can't actually see where that came from. It was from one of the other parts anyway. And what I did was I resampled it, and then I dropped it into Isotope Iris. So I took a sample of it, dropped it in there, and this is basically like a spectrogram. You can choose what areas of the frequency or in time that it's going to play. So it was the tape delay piano, I can see from the sample there. And you can load up 4 layers in there. There's a load of things that come with it, and impulses and sounds, but you can load up any sound that you want. And you can just, really cool sound design tool. So I dropped that in there and then drowned it in some reverb, and then it ended up sounding like that. So it just adds a little extra element for the second half, but other than that, I'm reusing a lot of the same parts, just a slightly different arrangement. So that is all of the musical parts, I think. So what we'll do is have a look now at the effects, ambient parts. Effects is, a lot of this stuff is resampled bits that I've made. Few bits started from samples that I found, and then a lot of the other bits I've kind of, or some of the other bits I've made from other bits within the track. So just got some. Oh, actually, before I carry on, all of those things, all of the musical elements were going into, just find the musical subgroup. Not a lot going on there, just a little bit of EQ to bring out some of the nice frequencies, but the main thing is that it's got a sidechain on it from the snare, and instead of using a sidechain compressor on this, I use this dynamic EQ. So the main frequencies in the snare, fundamental and some of the tops, it's just pulling those out, triggered by a sidechain. So yeah, the ambient effects are these. And those just interplay in and around those musical elements quite nicely. In terms of what's going on there, I think that is, that says stretch reverse verb effects. So like I say, some of these are just like resampled from bits within it, and what I'll tend to do is find a sound within the track. If I want to make some effects, I'll find like a melodic sound, sample it, stretch it, reverse it, put some effects on it, and then just sort of repeat that process until I get something that sounds quite cool. And that's what I've done with that. I think that's probably from one of the keys or something. I've got a delay stab in there, which I think is just a straight up sample. That's just got a bit of delay on it. Another delay stab. This little R on Cubase tells you that you've rendered it in place. So that one would have been rendered from another bit, and then I've just done some extra processing on it. And then I've reversed it for this bit. So it's the same sound with sort of multiple different takes on it. And that's come off this delay, that's come from this here, which I've then resampled. And then what I've done, what I normally have is this, one of these, just a folder down the bottom with any old bits that I've used. So if I want to come back to them, I can. And that's resampled from here. So this plugin that I mentioned earlier on is doing most of the work on that. So just giving you some weird artifacts in it, and then just what I do is resample it, find the bits that I like. So this would have been the sampled version of it, like the second render of it. So you see, you just get these random little bits, and then just pick out the bits that you like, use them again, reverse bits, resample, whatever, just till you get to something that's useful for what you need. It just makes it a bit more original than just dropping in something out of a sample pack, I guess. That's just a straight up sweep, I think. Don't know where that's from. No processing on that. This is a piano sample that's obviously been reversed. So I will tend to use things that I've created over, like I don't use a lot of risers and things like that. I use a bit of white noise rise here and there, but I don't tend to use a lot of just stock risers. I'll make things that build a little bit or create a bit of a rise, but I won't use like a sort of stock rise. I'll just make them out of things, reversing stuff quite a lot. So So yeah, those are the main sort of effects and ambient elements really, and they just sort of play off between each other throughout, but nothing crazy going on there. Oh, that sound in the background, actually, I'd forgotten about that. So that's an example of how I don't use risers, but I'll use something different. It sounds like a riser, but that was actually, I don't know why, but for some reason I put the frequency echo on one of the loops, and it just created this really cool sort of riser sound, really. So just automated a load of the stuff on it. So that's where that little sort of build comes from. It's actually one of the loops going through that, and then just bypassed it as soon as it got to the drop. So yeah, that's the drums, musical elements. What we got left? So onto the bass, really. I think before we look at the bass, we'll have a look at the vocals, because there's not a lot to that. It only happens once. This is just a random vocal sample that I found. I can't remember where it's from, but
steady your mind on your plan. Focus on the goal and be in self-command. You are love. You are light. You are bliss.
so really what's going on that is a bit of reverb. There's like an old radio preset on this, so it just makes it sound, it's probably just like a low and high pass filter. An auto pan, so it just kind of sort of swinging between left and right. So what I wanted to do was, I wanted it to be there, you can hear it. So in terms of like listening to it, if you're listening on headphones, it'll sound like it's going quite wide. If you're listening on speakers, sort of at home, it'll sound perhaps a little clearer. But what I wanted it to do was just be this kind of vocal that kind of sat there in the background. It appeared, but not necessarily that legible. Low and high cut as well, and then kind of came into focus with the main phrase at the end where it says bliss. So it's kind of going back and forth. So then I just turn that off, and then it just focuses it in the center. And yeah, that's the vocal. And then the final thing to look at is the basses. So in terms of the basses, it's fairly simple, to be honest. So I've just got this main sub, which is just coming off just a sub sample that I've got off the sampler track at the bottom of Cubase. Bit of saturation. That's not really doing an awful lot. Don't know what that's doing. Just a gentle roll off on the bottom, roll off on the top there. Going into a bit of compression. And then the other basses, like most of the other bass sounds within it, came off that. So that there's quite a lot of heavy processing going on those. But this was actually made from that original bass. So the second bass that comes in as the track is building is just as a result of loads of processing. So if I turn all that off, that's all just sort of thickening and fattening that up, but actually that all comes from down here. So if I go down the bottom, I can see what we got. Got various different versions of it to get to that final one. So if I turn the processing off on that, that's just the main sub. And then I've just added some trash. I'm not sure particularly what preset I'd used on it, but just really driving it. Rolled off the bottom on it because that's obviously coming from the sub, and then a bit of Saturn, so it's all just about distorting it really. And then I would have resampled that again, so to get to this, which is then where I then put it onto the main track, and then added a next layer of all of these bits on here. So if I go to that and then have a look at what that's doing, so that's then going into trash, a couple of different trash instances, saturation knob, bit more EQ just to take off the bottom and a few resonant frequencies, tremolo, just to bring out that it's already got a bit of like tremolo sort of pulsating sound going to it, and that was just to emphasize it. And then a bit of like parallel processing via this, just a bit of tiny, not really any compression, but then that's just adding that's adding a bit of width to it and a little bit of tops. That is for the most part the basses, and then in the second half I wanted to add something a little bit different, so I didn't want to just drop back into the same thing from the start. I wanted it to change up, so then I add in these extra little bits, which then is like another sort of call and answer between the basses in the second half. And some of those have come off the main bass from the beginning, and then some of them I think come off, there's another sample that I had. But if I just scroll down and have a look, so where are we? That's part of it. So if I turn all those off on there, that is just a DN heavy. So that's a heavy distorted bass that I've sampled. I think that might be from the other distorted bass in the first half actually, that I've used again. And then I've just added a bit more saturation. I've added this DIY plugin again, just to get some weirdness. A bit of pushed up the mids, just to focus it a little. And then this mini filter is what's giving it a bit of the movement. And then I just sort of picked the best bits out that I wanted that would work. Maybe some of those are in there. So what we got? What's in here? That's just another one of the layers that went into the other distorted bass from the beginning. Just adding a bit of top sizzle to it, which I think is from a sample out the Total Science pack, which is on Splice, I think. And that was just laid into the top of that. See if I can find that. No, not sure where that is, but yeah, you get the idea. So they're coming off basically all the bits of distorted basses and sounds, which I've then resampled, and then I've just chopped up to get these little whoops and little different bits. The tremolo wobbly one, that is just coming off the main sub, which all I did was I added this particular trash to it, to the main sub. which I was going to leave the sub like that and do that, and then I thought, no, I don't like it doing it the whole way through. I'll just add it as a little sort of play off in the sort of extra basses. So I just did that, and then just chopped a little bit out, and then just used that here, which is mimicking the other distorted bass as well. So then when you get them all together, so it's just a little call and answer between those again. If I look up into the musical parts just to see, there's not a lot going on in there. So the musical parts kind of clear out a bit of space for these basses to kind of take a bit more of the limelight, really. And that is all the basses. So in terms of any processing on those, I've got a bass channel, got just a bit of compression, bit of OTT. I don't use this masses really, I don't really use OTT a lot. I used it on this. It brings out quite a lot of that mid-range. And then I've got a couple of instances of the F6 on there, which are doing just some different side chaining. So this one's coming from the kick, and this one's coming from the snare. So that's just doing something. Sometimes I'd use just a normal compressor for the side chain. Sometimes I'll go for dynamic EQ to do it, or like a side chain EQ to do it, should I say. But that is pretty much the whole track. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you found that useful. I know I probably missed out a couple of bits, so if I did, stick them in the comments below, ask any questions, and I'll get back to people. You can also find me on socials on Digital Native UK on Facebook and SoundCloud, and if you want to find me on Instagram, that's Digital Native 84. I've also got a YouTube, Digital Native DNB, if you want to find me on there. I've got a few other tutorials and bits on there, and I'll be adding some stuff to that over the next few months. Cheers.